Welcome to our lecture on Greek tragedy, especially Sophocles, who lived from 496 to 406 BC. That was the remarkable century of Athenian hegemony among the Greek city-states. We'll see this in future lectures, but the classical period is inaugurated with the defeat of the Persians in their second attempt to take over the Greek mainland in 480-479. During this century, certain reforms that had been begun in the previous century came to fruition. Solon, the great lawgiver, had laid the foundation for a developing democratic ethos in Athens. And that was about the time of, it was right before Thales introduced the great innovation of philosophy. And these developments should be seen all together. That is, next session we'll talk about the development of historiography with Herodotus, so history as a certain kind of inquiry, philosophy as a way of pursuing the question of existence in terms of logos without rejecting myth, and then with Greek tragedy, which is the preeminent form of drama, which developed in Athens and flourished during the century, and then its great period comes with the defeat of Athens in the Peloponnesian War at the end of the 400s. So in Greek tragedy, we have another way of pursuing the great question of existence, the question about the truth of existence. And the question I would like us to have in mind in particular is, how do we learn our role in the drama of existence? Reading a play like Antigone, I believe, profoundly helps us in trying to get our bearings and how to live our lives. We can think of our lives as a matter of playing a role or several roles. We have the social script that says this is what success looks like, this is what a person of my status, my sex, so on, should do. And we either fulfill those roles or we play off against them, but in one way or another, we're always trying to negotiate the social script and how we want to live our lives. By reading great drama, we think about Shakespeare in the English language, but going back to the great fountainhead of drama, which are these great Athenian tragedians, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, we gain a sense of very primal forces. We come to understand that in the melodrama of our lives so often, which is filled with trivia, which seems to be filled with incidents that have no intrinsic import. Really what's going on, though, is something very profound. There are primal forces at play in every one of our lives. And I believe that Greek tragedy, as we call it, these Athenian dramas really do help us gain a sense of the import of everyday life and what role I would like to play in order to live authentically. Tragedy is, we've come to identify that with sad things, but it's originally a formal term to designate a drama of serious subject matter. It comes from the Greek for goat song. We're not quite sure why. Tragoidia means why goat song would be it could be because early winners of dramatic contests would have been awarded a goat. That's a pure guess based on the term, but we really just don't know. Tragedy arises really because it's during Athens' acme, its golden age, as it were, between the great wars, the Persian Wars, which we're going to look into with Herodotus in particular next session, and then with the Peloponnesian War, which saw the collapse of the great age of Athens at the end of the 400s. So between these wars, we have Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, these great names. We only have a couple of dozen of their plays remaining out of 1,000 or so dramas that would have been written during this great high point of drama, so it's a great loss. And then we know it is just a fraction of each of these great playwrights that we've got. Sophocles was probably the preeminent playwright of the century. He was a person of, he was a leading citizen. He was one of the commissioners appointed to deal with the disaster of the Sicilian expedition during the Peloponnesian War. He was the one who received the cult statue of Asclepius for Athens. So, and it seemed to be his claim to become a minor hero after his own death with his own cult. And so he was one of the financial commissioners for the Delian League. So he was an important person in the public life of the polis, and that's important because tragedy isn't just about some fairyland, even though virtually every single one of the plays we've got, the subject matter of tragedy is mythological. But that doesn't mean, and we've already seen this in previous discussions, mythology doesn't mean make-believe. It doesn't mean some kind of fantasy. It is a mode of pursuing the deep questions about what existence is all about. And the tragedians are doing that at a higher level. After the emergence of philosophy, as philosophy develops even in Athens, as the sophists rise in Athens, as history is being created as a discipline and inquiry, as medicine goes on and so on, tragedy is a way of taking myth and using it, as it were, critically. That is, mythology was never a set script. Certain things about the stories that would come down in the myths that were told would have been kind of set, like the Greeks won the Trojan War. You wouldn't be able to change that. But other things, such as whether a certain famous couple had a child or not, all of that artists could play with. They could give new endings to stories that were traditionally told. And so the tragedians are doing this. They're taking mythological stories and they're giving a spin on them in light of current events. That is, they're using mythology in a critical way, as it were. Tragoedia, tragedy, seems to have developed under Pisistratus, who was a tyrant of Athens in the third quarter of the sixth century. And he was one who was very interested in promoting the cultural cachet of Athens. Tyrant did not have the same negative connotations as we think of now, and even as Athenians would have thought of later. It meant originally basically monarchy, one-man rule. And it was in the great contest between aristocrats and, conflicts amongst aristocrats. If one aristocrat felt marginalized, one option would be to seize power by making an alliance, as it were, behind the backs of other aristocrats with the people, the demos. And so that, in a way, tyranny and democracy were in a delicate dance, as opposed to aristocracy. And all through the development of the polis, the city-states of the Greek-speaking world, through the end of the Dark Ages into the Classical Age, we have, and through the Archaic Age into the Classical Age, we have developing democracies in at least, in maybe half of the 1,000 polis of the Greek-speaking world. So democracy was something that was very much bubbling up in the world. Aristocracy was in recession. Oedipus, it seems, he's considered the first playwright, the first tragedian, and therefore we get thespian from his name. And he seems to have innovated, whatever the origins of tragedy, it seems to have started from something like corporate singing. So we have choruses. And then at some point, Oedipus said, let's take one of the choruses singing about a mythological theme. Let's take let's take someone, set him aside. That'll be a person to represent one of the characters being sung about. And we'll actually speak in first person as that character. That would be the actor. So now we have an actor and a chorus, and that would be the beginning of tragedy. And then it seems that, according to Aristotle, Aeschylus added a second actor to go along with the chorus. And then Sophocles himself was the one who added a third actor, and it never went beyond 3 actors. So how was it possible to do that? Well, these males, and it was always males who did perform the roles, they would wear masks and trade out. And you can kind of track in Antigone, how can you have so many characters in this play and just have 3 actors? Well, you'll notice at any one time there's only 3. There's no more than 3 on stage. So there's switching out. You think about the immense, different kind of skills that these actors, and the term was Hippocrates, that is where we get Hypogrid. But really the word means interpreter or answerer. So the actor is really in an organic relationship to the chorus as one who's responding to the chorus or interpreting the chorus's song and dance, as it were. The chorus was always singing and dancing, it seems, which is one of the things that makes it hard to restage Greek tragedy, because we don't have any access to what that kind of dancing would have looked like. We don't know what that music would have sounded like. But so it was very much more like an opera in that sense. It was a multimedia kind of event. There was singing, music, dancing. The chorus was doing that. Okay, so these actors would have had to project in Athens at the theater Dionysus on the southern slope of the Acropolis. If they had 12 to 17,000 people sitting in the stands, as it were, in the seats of the teatron, is what it was called, the teatron, facing the orchestra, the dancing place where the chorus was dancing and singing, and then the actors were playing off of them. Think about what it would take without any voice amplification to be able to project to such a vast crowd, but they had that skill. People would sit for hours during these religious festivals watching these full trilogies, actually, trilogy of plays plus a Seder play. So all day long for 3 days in a row. At the city Dionysia, especially, this was the premier religious festival of Athens in honor of the god Dionysus. Dionysus was the god of wine, ecstasy, fertility. He was a very strange god born of a human mother. Rescued when she went up in flames because she saw Zeus in all his glory, and Zeus rescued the embryonic or fetal, I guess, Dionysus, and put him in his thigh, and so ultimately was birthed from the thigh of Zeus. So this is a very interesting god. He was also known as Eleutherios, which means the liberator. So for people who, especially a self-consciously democratic Athens, who was valuing liberty, and every Greek city-state valued liberty above all, and that's what Herodotus, we'll see, holds as the Greek value as opposed to Persian obeisance. Dionysus was the liberator, right? So somehow through wine, ecstasy, he's the one who's taking us out of ourselves, out of the constraints, and helping us to live an authentic life, it would seem. So it would seem a fitting divine patron for theater, if theater is doing what I claimed at the beginning of this presentation it to be. That is, it's a way of trying to, theater is helping us gain access to how to live the role of our lives, right, in a way that's authentic. In the city Dionysia, during the religious festival, which happened late March, early April, there would be 3 tragedians who would present a set of, each one would present a tetralogy. We only have one extant trilogy plus the Seder play, which makes the 4th, and that is Aeschylus's the Oresteia. We have Agamemnon, libation bearers, and Eumenides, and that's the only trilogy we've got. We only have one Seder play from Euripides, so it's really, the losses are incredible, but we should be very grateful for what did survive. By law, in Athens, the wealthiest citizens were required to fund public works, like to outfit a trireme or a gymnasium. One of the great liturgies, and that was the term for it, the public work that one could get behind, would have been to sponsor one of these tetralogies. So Playwrights would submit proposals, would submit their plays to the eponymous archon, who was the chief magistrate who gave his name to the year. That's why it's called the eponymous archon. And the eponymous archon would select 3 playwrights to have their plays produced, and they would be produced by wealthy Athenian citizens, and that role would have been taken. That wealthy patron, the producer, as we would call that person now, would have been called a choregos, that is, the chorus leader. Again, the chorus is somehow very important. It's at the root of this phenomenon of tragedy. Okay, so the citizens of Athens, and maybe even women and slaves, were not sure exactly who was able to attend these performances, but at least the citizen body, the free adult males of military age, gathering together in the thousands, sitting for hours on end each day, watching plays. This was a different world than what we've got now. When we look at Antigone, and we know that the topic there has to do with the children of Oedipus, right? So the great fallout from this horrible fate that befell this man, to kill his father, marry his mother, and so on. So it's the children of Oedipus that are playing out this fate in Antigone. There's a civil war with Thebes in the city of Thebes. And you know about how the question of whether the human law created by Creon, you can't bury a rebel, supersedes Antigone's duty to her brother to make sure that he has peace after his death, to bury him. This great conflict between oikos, the private, the household, the family, and polis, the public realm, the realm of laws, right? And often in Greek tragedy, or in Athenian tragedy, we have the private realm being linked to the female, and the public realm being linked to the male, and that's certainly what we have in Antigone. And it's worth thinking about why it is that the private, which is tied even more directly, it seems, to the divine, right? The divine command to be pious towards your family, even if that goes against a political norm. So that there's a lot of these questions that are raised, and these are the questions that come up as political mythology, as I've called it, enters into a critical age after the rise of philosophy, as historiography is being created. The Greek tragedians are doing the same thing. They're having this conversation using myth to ask questions about recent events, to ask about democracy, to ask questions about Athens as it goes on its way to becoming an empire, as it does when it transforms the Delian League into its own empire. Aeschylus at the end of Eumenides seems to be saying, because he's linking that story that set in mythological time to the creation of the Areopagus, which had just a few years before his writing and presenting the play had become sharply curtailed by democratic forces, which were radicalizing democracy throughout as the 400s went on. So it is a question in tragedy of trying to take traditional stories and making them critically exploratory, to make them instruments of understanding the primal forces that are at work in the events of the time and of one's own life. And just to end briefly with a few technical terms. So we've got the viewing area, which is where the audience is, the theatron, the orchestra, where the chorus is singing and dancing, the actors are interacting. The skene, which is where we get the word scene, is at first it was a tent, because that's what the word means, tent, and we know that from, say, John's prologue. Skenosin is and the word becomes flesh and dwells among us. It tabernacles in tents with us. Well, skene is that word. It later became a wood structure. It was where actors changed and it was right there, it seems, at the back of the orchestra. There was another device called the ekuklema, which would be rolled out of the skene and it would display what was happening in the skene. So a lot of the most important events happen off stage in Greek tragedy. This would be one way of bringing some of that onto stage, but most violent acts happen off stage, and then we get them reported by messenger speeches. So that's another thing to consider. It's very different from popular entertainment now. And finally, we had the mekane, which was a crane that would fly in, say, deities, and that's where we get the term deus ex machina, right? It's some god coming in and resolving things at the end. And generally, the structure of a Greek tragedy would be, there would be a prologue or not, the entrance of the chorus, the parados, the episodes. Episodia would be actors talking with each other or actors interacting with the chorus. In between those episodes would be stasima, which are the choral songs, which themselves would be part of the chorus would sing, and then the other part would respond, strophe, antistrophe. And then finally the chorus would depart the stage, exodos, and would usually provide a moral as far as what one should take away from what one has just witnessed. So I hope that this helps set up a profound experiencing of Antigone, which is truly a kind of harrowing experience, the way Greek tragedy is, and it's meant to expose us to the depths of these primal duties, the primal questions of what law matters, the higher law, the human law, what are we willing to risk to be pious, and what is prudent, and what is just. And these are the questions that Sophocles so brilliantly enmeshes us in this wonderful play, Antigone.